This is Jean Eaton with Information Managers, your practical management mentor. I'm delighted that you've joined us today for our Practice Management Nugget Webinar. And today I am delighted to be able to introduce to you Gord Sheppard. Gord Sheppard is a facilitator and has a background in broadcasting. Gord provides training and meeting facilitation for members and associations of all kinds. So I'm going to welcome Gord and ask Gord to provide us with just a quick bio before we start with the presentation today. We're going to learn how to create awesome meetings with Gord Sheppard. Welcome, Gord.
Jean, it's great to be here on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity, and a big part of it for me is in the time that we spend here together today. I really hope to give your audience as many practical tips, information, and hopefully some inspiration to go to their next meeting and make it more productive and make it more profitable. In terms of bio, for me, honestly, I've got about 25 years of work experience. I have a master's in business education, a drama degree, ironically, that combines well, and it leads me to become really an effective meeting facilitator and consultant who can sort of zoom in and zoom out in any given meeting and help people to come together in a unique way. I run 3-hour meetings, board meetings, corporate meetings, all these types of things where people are getting energized. They're getting more done in these meetings than ever before. And then when I'm doing this type of teaching, whether it's teaching at the university or this kind of thing, people are really getting a lot of tips and information they can use. So hopefully we can do that with you today. And the one thing I always like to let people know is I estimate that I've actually been in more than 2,000 meetings in my lifetime, and I'm only 48 years old. I know they weren't all very great. I know the ones I do now as an independent consultant and facilitator work well, but and so again, if I can take my sort of corporate meeting moments where I was dying a slow death and take it forward and make it better for you and your audience, I'm looking forward to that.
Well, we've all been in meetings and some of them are not as good as others. So I'm delighted to be able to have you with us, Gord, and to have you show us about meetings, and we're going to learn great things. So I want to remind our audience to download the checklist from Gord, the 10 ways to create awesome meetings. And I want to let you know you need to stay to the end because Gord has a fantastic offer for you at the end of our webinar today. So Gord, take it away. Tell us about creating awesome meetings.
Well, I'm going to interact with you a fair bit on the call here, and also just sort of let your audience keep a few things in mind. But one of the things I always do with presentations is say, you know, how many people love meetings? And if you're sitting there at your computer right now, just raise your hand or half raise your hand. Generally with audiences, it's less than 5% that I'm seeing raise their hands. And as we move on to the sort of next moment in the slides, I often ask, you know, well, how many people have fallen asleep in a meeting? So when we click forward there to pick up that slide, that's sort of one of the things that I like to think about for audiences as well. And so, and funny enough, you know, people start to admit the reality. They're sitting in these meetings. Some of them have fallen asleep during meetings. And so what we hope to do is move forward from that.
Okay. There are lots of meetings and there are a lot of things to be able to consider about meetings. So some of them are not as good as others. So how can we do better?
Well, you know, I talked a little bit about sort of my passion for meetings and again, why I think they're so important. And if we click on to the next slide here, just while we're moving forward, then what I like to say to people is I think meetings in your organization are your early warning system. They're really your canary in the coal mine. And when I say canary in the coal mine, you know, there was this old practice years ago where the miners would take a canary down into the coal mine. If the canary lived, they went to work. And if the canary died, they couldn't go to work because there was deadly gases in the coal mine. Now, I often hope that there's not deadly gases in your meetings, but I like to think that if you use the meetings, you know, because if people are in meetings generally 15, 20% of their week, often in many organizations, you know, you really want to optimize them so that, you know, your canary is staying alive and well and happy and singing a nice song.
Okay, let's avoid the deadly gases.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and we'll click forward here now and sort of keep moving forward. So these are the 10 ways, and you can click 10 times right here, and I'll just sort of work people through it. We're going to talk about getting real with yourself today, getting real with your team, knowing your total meeting cost, having a great facilitator, We'll talk about how to connect your meetings to your strategy. We'll also talk about building a good agenda that you can use, as well as how, where are you meeting, thinking about the space that you're going to be in. Resources we'll touch on as well, following up, which I think is critical for any meeting, as well as the, really helping to inspire you to take action. So let's just jump right into the first one. So getting real with yourself. And we'll click forward one more time. And this is a critical one for me, because I think what happened for me back in about 2004, I was working in a corporate setting, and I realized I was coming home complaining quite a bit about the meetings that I was in this corporate setting for a long time, like 18 months worth of come home and talk to my wife and say, I'm just dying in these things. This is terrible. And I blather on and on. One day she shocked me and she said, just stop complaining. Now, I always wonder how many people are going home after meetings or bad moments at work and they're talking to their spouse or their significant other. They're losing a lot of time. And what I realized then is I used to think it was my manager's fault, but really the reality was it was my fault too. And so one of the big messages that I think people want to take away is you can choose how you act during a meeting. And one of the inspirations that I find for this is a gentleman named Viktor Frankl, who was taken prisoner of war in the Nazi concentration camps in World War II. He was a psychologist, and when he went in, 1 in 28 people made it out of those camps. He was a survivor, but one of the ways that he survived is very unique. He realized that between stimulus and response, there's a distance. And in that distance, in that space, is the power to choose your freedom. And he was able to articulate that. So I hope that you're able to choose your freedom, in a sense, choose the way you act in your next meeting and really make it more effective from your own point of view. Go ahead. Another thing that you can do when you go to your meetings is, really make great points. And this is a little acronym that I've come up with to use the word point. It's a reminder for me and hopefully a reminder for you going forward that you can use in your next meeting. But, if you start with the letter P, it's obvious that you want to prepare your idea and get it ready so that when you're going to your meeting and you're asked to speak, that, you've got as much information as possible. And that's from talking to your colleagues and, writing things down and doing your research. The O in point for me is optimization, so that when you go to speak, it's not some of the blather I think that we're hearing from so many people in meetings. They go on and on and on. They don't get to the point. So if you can optimize it, say it in about 30 seconds. Some people like to say it that way, or just in a few quick sentences. Then it's optimized so that when you go to speak, you sound fantastic. Then it's time to listen with the I in point and invite feedback. And that's where you really just sort of stop. You kind of zip it for a second. And you say, okay, what do you think about my idea? And that creates the discussion around your idea that's going to help to move it forward with the people in the meeting. Next, you want to use the and to name the hurdles and solutions. And I think this is important right after you've made your point. You want to find out, what are the obstacles and what are the things that you can do about it? Because that leads to T, which is to take action. And you really want to take action because, otherwise, why are you saying what you're saying during a meeting? So if you can keep this little acronym in mind, I think it'll help you in your next meeting. Go ahead.
Okay, and Gord, I'd like to jump in. This is really important information for everybody who attends any meeting.
Totally. I think it's universal, and so much of what I'm seeing as a facilitator and often when people are running into meetings is, around this one, people just don't know how to make a point. Sometimes they're too quiet. They don't make a point at all. Sometimes they talk on and on and on. So can you imagine if everyone in your meeting practiced this acronym, how much more effective your meetings would become?
Right. And as somebody who attends a meeting, you have that responsibility to participate and write these things down so that you are better prepared.
Better prepared. And if you're going in prepared, and this is before, during, and after a meeting, you want to be going before you're prepared. Then when you're there, you know how to speak and you know how to listen effectively and in a succinct way. And that way your meeting isn't kind of droning on and on.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Get real with your team. This is step 2 in the 10 steps. So this is a whole lecture in and of itself, and there's lots of things to talk about. But one of the things I think that gets lost in a lot of corporate meetings or settings where we're going to work together every day is we don't take the time to build rapport with each other. And that's really, really important. So I would take a step back, really make each other, get to know each other as much as possible. And I'll leave it there. There's all kinds of exercises and tips for this kind of thing. But building rapport, if you don't really know each other, then you can't empathize with each other. So that really, if you know each other well, it can really help with listening when you're helping each other during a meeting. The other thing I talk a lot about is setting your team up for success. And specifically around here, let's just say, for example, you're going into a meeting and you want to create an innovative idea. You want to come up with a new thing. I think you have to look at it like you're looking at your hockey team. Do these people coming into the meeting have the skill set to create an innovative solution? Sometimes I know I walked into those corporate meetings, they'd be asking for innovation, but the people in the room weren't the right people to answer the question. So set your team up for success during a meeting. Make sure they've got the skill sets, the emotional intelligence, the actual knowledge intelligence to pull that forward so that your meeting is really, really worthwhile.
Okay.
Know your total meeting cost. Jean, do you have a favorite hockey team?
Now, if you ask me about football, of course, I'd go with the Edmonton football.
You love the Eskimos, right? And so I'll talk about any sports franchise, but for fun, just for hockey, I always like to say, you know, the average NHL player salary, if you add up the total salary for a hockey team, it's about $60 million a year. And then just for fun, if they work 2,000 hours a year like you and me, a 1 hour meeting with the players alone is $30,000. And I just think when you put it in that perspective, I can't imagine if, you know, the Oilers or whoever this team is, the Leafs, are having a bad game and suddenly the coach is in there talking to them for an hour, costs you 30 grand and the players don't even care. It drives me crazy. The reality is meetings automatically start at about $1,000. Once you add in the space costs and all this kind of thing around wages and this kind of stuff for, you know, an average meeting of say 6 to 10 people, you're $1,000. So your per minute cost is already there. So if you're not making a great point, if you're not respecting each other's time, I think it's really important to have this as a motivator to really make your meetings worthwhile. So there's the formula right there. You know, just go around, do a thumbnail, you know, check on each person, think about their total wages for that 1 hour. What is the room cost, the rental cost, whatever that is, if you're adding in a meal or that kind of stuff, add it up, get that per hour cost and be clear about it so that you don't waste a second in your next meeting.
That's an awesome point. And those dollar figures, I know are going to be a whole lot bigger than we might think it is. So how would you use that dollar figure? Is that something that you could start a meeting or a series of meetings to say, you know, we've done our total meeting cost and our meeting cost is this much. Share the information so everybody gets that shock value and has a better respect for it.
I love that you said shock value because that's exactly what it's here to do. You want to ignite these people. And you know, if you're just, one of my favorites is, you know, if you spent, you know, 45 minutes talking about the gluten-free hot dog issue at your next staff barbecue, and in the meantime, sales are down 25%. That's ridiculous. So you've really got to move quickly through this. And I think the meeting cost thing really appeals to certainly business owners, and they should appeal to high-level executives. And they're the guys that want to know that really they should put the effort into making these meetings awesome so that they can not lose a second and not waste any money.
And certainly would apply to your staff meetings. So if you've got a healthcare practice and you've got a team meeting coming up, then let's make sure that we acknowledge why this meeting is so important and what the cost value is associated with that.
Well, I'm glad you said healthcare because, you know, average all in, if you threw in the benefits on a per hour on the wages alone for a healthcare worker, it's got to be in the probably $100 to $200 an hour range, depending on which specialization they're holding. So very quickly that adds up into the thousands. So you don't have time to mess around in meetings.
Good plan. Thank you.
Get a great facilitator. This is a whole lecture in and of itself. The thing that I'm going to say is if you have a bad meeting facilitator, if the person you know, doesn't know how to run meetings, either get them the training and teach them how to, so you don't waste time in meetings, or get them off the bus. And I say this very clearly to people because you don't have time to waste time in meetings. And if your facilitator just isn't working out, you've got to get rid of them sooner or later. It's a tough management decision always. But if they're not going to get through that quick training, like I mean in 90 days where they're really good at running meetings, replace them and move forward. And that's all I'm going to say about this slide here for today, because that's really the main point.
Okay.
Get real with your strategy. So this is the heart of the matter and one of the joy points for me, because I believe that you should be able to connect any moment in any meeting directly to your strategy. And I'm going to say that twice because I think it's so important. I think we should be able to stop this meeting right now and for your audience say, is this moment connected directly to what they need to know to move their business forward? And if it's not, they should get off the call right now. If it is, then we know we're on track and we're meeting our strategic objectives. One of the things I do as a facilitator is I'll say, okay, so I think you should connect your meeting to your strategy. What is your vision for your organization? Now, that's often a stumbling block for people because Sometimes they can't articulate it. Sometimes it's too wordy. They don't really know what it is. They know why they're there. So it forces them to say, okay, well, if I have to connect this meeting to my vision, what is my vision? And then immediately that falls into then, you know, your vision. So what are your top 3 strategic objectives? From this meeting that we're having online today, I would hope that their objective would be productivity. One of their key 3 strategic objectives. They logged onto this. They wanted to get some information to get more productive and more profitable. And if we're doing things right, they're getting that as we do this. Imagine that in every one of your meetings. Imagine if every one of your meetings carried your strategy forward. In fact, I spoke to someone at WestJet one time, and they said part of what they do in every meeting that they're in is read out their vision statement at the beginning of the meeting. Well, doesn't that make vision statements worthwhile if they're really present in everything that you're doing on a week-by-week basis?
It makes it very real.
Absolutely. So I'm thrilled about this sort of piece of information. I think the more people that can do it, the better it's going to be for their organizations.
Great.
Create a blockbuster agenda. If you click forward one more time, I always like to think, wonder if meetings, imagine if they were as exciting as your favorite Hollywood film. Do you have a favorite Hollywood film? Godfather, that kind of stuff?
Oh, yes. Can't think of a title.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So if you think about Avatar, Godfather, those are maybe date me a little bit in terms of my age. Take your pick. Fast and Furious, maybe your audience is enjoying too. I like to think that the poor little meeting agenda is just really getting short shift these days, and people really aren't putting the time in to prepare them. So again, this is like getting ready before the meeting. So again, using this acronym, it's kind of a reminder. You don't need to follow it exactly, but if all of these items are covered on your agenda, and I mean right on the agenda itself, then that's beyond just making like a 6 or 7 point list of you talk and then Bob says something and whatever. This gets into really then having to stage the meeting, using the agenda as a tool, as a script, almost like a script like you would in a Hollywood film. So when I say A for attention grabber, there's a couple things. One, you noticed in this meeting, I said, does anybody ever fall asleep in a meeting? And that really gets people's attention right away because it starts off a fun part of the conversation. But another way to grab attention is to walk into the room as a senior leader and say, okay, in our medical practice right now, we're down 20% in customer base, and that's affecting our profits by 30%. And just leave that hanging there like that. If that's your main concern, that really gets people's attention. So the way you grab attention can be fun. It can also be very serious, but get people's attention in a short way very, very quickly. Then have great goals. And I mentioned one of them before in terms of, being able to strive for productivity. Let's use that as our goal for this meeting. That goes right onto the agenda. It's a great goal and it's printed right there and you know what you're going for. You also want to create excitement. There's different ways to do that. You can bring up inspiring people that are related to the topic that you're talking about. Let's say it was innovation. We could talk about Henry Ford, who said, let's get a car in every driveway in America, and went on essentially to achieve that and move people from the horse and buggy all the way into the auto. And that creates excitement around what's related to, say, an innovation discussion. Whatever you need to get excited about, you can bring in a quote, whatever it is, allow that to be right on the agenda to remind the facilitator to bring that forward. The navigation tools, when I put them there, for me, I'll say an example of a navigation tool that I use as a facilitator is to zoom in and to zoom out. And when I say zoom in, we might be down on a little piece of detail around a topic, and the minutiae of that detail is happening. But then very quickly, as a facilitator, I can always pull back, like I said before, to the strategy, the why are we here? And I can float between those things. That's one of my tools, zoom in, zoom out, that I remind myself with constantly. And I have that written on agendas when I go in to facilitate a meeting. Decide now. This is one of my favorite ones. Have you ever done an agenda?
Yes, absolutely.
On your next agenda, can you imagine if you had decide now beside every point on the agenda and you had to make a decision about it and get that done and move on?
It would help you keep focused.
I think it's so important for meetings because I know certainly as good Canadians, we let each other off the hook quite too often. And the decide now is the reminder to say, we got to get moving forward. Otherwise, you hear this phrase all the time, we have meetings about meetings, and you don't want to do that. So the agenda is one of those places you have as a tool to use that as a tool and decide things right away. And then, of course, the A for the accountability check-in, very, very important to use the agenda. And that's the sort of thing where, let's just say you made a commitment at the end of a meeting in the last meeting, and then we know that it's coming back on the next agenda, and it would say something like, Gene, did you promise to deliver this so that we could listen to it later and have our productivity increase? And then we would check in with you at the next meeting and know that you did it. And that's sort of the A in the agenda for me. Another great tool.
Okay. So in your model then, Gord, are you suggesting that the facilitator be the one that develops the agenda or contributes to it?
I think I think that can work in a team approach, or it can work also in having your right-hand man. So let's say some facilitators are not, say, the best sort of detailers. Then you have someone in your organization who really loves putting this stuff together, getting it all together and getting it ready. And then you kind of run it by the facilitator, you know, who might be the senior leader, for their approvals and edits. Or if the senior leader carves out the time and can actually do all these skills, I would suggest they do it all themselves, for sure.
Okay. So it might not be the facilitators only. It may not only be the facilitator that does the agenda, but the facilitator is the one that makes sure that the agenda has all these key points or all these key elements built in.
I think if you were a Hollywood director, imagine just that you're a Hollywood director. You got to walk into the meeting and create excitement. The agendas don't carry passion these days. They carry bullet points. And we need passion to carry our objectives forward, to keep the teams ignited, and to really move profits forward as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Meet in the right space. So there's, you ever been in those meeting rooms where they're like, I don't know, got papers on the floor and coffee stains on the tables and whatever? How does that make you feel? Like if you came over to my house and my living room looked like that, it just wouldn't make any sense. Take 10 minutes to get your boardroom ready or whatever, and just make it the kind of place that's conducive to carrying forward the great goals that you're bringing forward on your agenda. And again, I could talk for quite a long time about this topic. The one thing I want to say to you is, have you ever done a walking meeting yourself?
I have, yes.
And why did you like it, and why did you do it?
Well, from a healthcare perspective, it makes sure that we're up from our desk and we actually get the health benefits of walking. So that's a good thing. And you get more into your day, but it helps me to think out of the box. It gets those creative juices moving in a way that sitting at my desk for 3 hours won't.
That's one of the best answers that I've heard for this all the way along. I advocate for this because it was passed along as a great tip for me, and I pass this along in every talk I do now. When I ask people to put their hand up if they've done walking meetings, most audiences that I speak with, less than 10% easily, have even heard of the concept. And then they light up like little kids. They're like, what do you mean? You mean I could go and take a walk instead of sitting around the boardroom or whatever it is? And now they're starting to do it. All I can say is the way that you expressed it, that's exactly what I would have said. Those are the benefits. All I can say to your audience is, please, 1 out of 4 meetings, 1 out of 2, get up, get moving for all those right reasons.
Okay, that sounds great.
Get awesome resources. What I'm going to say here is there's tons. So my website, createawesomemeetings.com, there's great books and all this kind of thing. I'm going to mention just a few book titles that you can take away. One is called The Facilitator's Field Book. I'll leave that title with your audience. And I'll also mention another one called Fierce Conversations. Now, Fierce Conversations is a book by a woman named Susan Scott. And she has wonderful things in that book, including this phrase: let the silence do the heavy lifting. And I think if you think about that, so often in meetings, we are, just blathering a lot, and there's not a lot of respect for quiet moments where things are really going to be thoughtful and get done in the right way. So if you get a chance, those two, and of course, I'll be talking a little bit about my own book towards the end of this one as well. So let's move on. Follow up fast. I think I've got another acronym in here, so we'll go one more.
Nope.
There it was. If we can get back to that one. Great. Again, I'm going to just, for respect of time, not spend too much time here, but the F in FAST for me is develop a feedback loop that makes sense for your team. A good example here is with older workers dealing with millennials. Millennials like to be texting and on Facebook. Older people like to send out blast emails. You've got to find the communication mode that makes sense for your team. So when I hear if the flow is in texting, then adjust and make sure that texting is the way we get information together, and then keep the information nice, short, and sweet. Astonish each other is the idea of, at the end of a meeting, if someone makes a commitment, you follow up when they achieve that commitment early. A great example is a sales call. If somebody says within a month I'm going to get 5 new customers, and they come back within a week and they've gotten 5 new customers, then you broadcast that to everybody and you astonish each other with that information. Standardizing the follow-up process, people kind of get this with information management, of course. If anything that you can do to standardize your communication, your follow-up pace, get into that. Again, we could talk on and on about that one. And tracking the progress, the basic question here that I would have for you and your clients to ask themselves is, where do we keep the data? And what do you hear back from your clients when you have that question for them?
Well, I hope they have a really good answer and they know exactly where their data is. We do a lot of things by sharing, and a lot of it on shared file systems.
And the shared file systems, I actually dig one layer deeper and I say, do you mean Ted's computer? Do you have a server? Are you in the cloud? Are you using Google Docs? What I'm looking for there in follow-up after meetings is common places where everybody has access to one document, so that the articulation of what needs to happen after a meeting is done in one place. And I can't say enough for that workflow. It's just that we fall into this email food chain where many ideas just get lost because people don't have time. They're inundated with these emails. So I'm looking for like Google Docs, where it's a common shared document. I know the data systems that are tied to CRMs and that kind of thing are quite robust in this area. It doesn't matter to me which system you have. I always want to make sure that you're tracking progress in a consistent manner.
And that way you don't get held up by somebody taking forever to get the minutes out.
I think that's start with the meeting minutes alone. Get them up in a common place. And then when someone emails you to say, where are the minutes? You don't email them back. You call them and you say, have you gone on to our common place, our Google Drive, wherever they are, and have you just typed in your information there? It really gives some relief to all those emails that are flying around and becoming essentially useless.
Absolutely. Okay. Good points for follow-up fast.
Great. And so let's bomb through this list. There we go. We got real with yourself, your team. We knew the cost. We got a facilitator concept. We connected our meetings to our strategy. We used the agenda as an acronym. We talked about walking meetings, getting great resources, following up quickly. And here's the last one, number 10. Take action. Out of all of these things, the thing that I would hope that you would do this information today is really take action. Benjamin Franklin says it well. Don't put off until tomorrow what you can get done today. Find your inspiration. Find the reason. If it's total meeting cost that inspires you, fantastic. If it's your coworker, and I'll give you an example. I was working in a corporate setting, and a coworker of mine who I just knew for years, I got to chat with her at length at a Christmas party. And I found out that she was actually donating most of her salary to her parents back in another country so they could build a house, send her cousins to school, and this kind of thing. So my inspiration from that moment on was her. I wanted to go to meetings and be better because I knew how hard she was working, not only for herself, but for her family. It's a great way to think about rapport. So maybe your inspiration comes from Ben Franklin. Maybe it comes from Gandhi, Oprah. It doesn't matter to me. Find the reason to make your meetings better and then do something about it. And I mean within 30 days, 60 days, get something done, make your meetings fantastic, and make your organization overall more productive and more profitable.
Okay, so we are inspired, Gord. And we want to be able to take action on all of this. And I'm going to remind people that they can enter their questions into the chat box, or they can send either Gord or me an email if you've got questions we haven't got a chance to get to today. But taking action, here are some steps that we can do next, Gord.
There it is. So I mentioned another great resource. My book is available now in softcover. It's called How to Create Awesome Meetings. It's a step-by-step guide. It really is an expansion on these 10 steps, 186 pages worth of all kinds of good tools, tips, inspiration that your audience could take forward, put into action right away to make their meetings, again, more productive and more profitable. It's available for sale at Audrey's Books in Edmonton. You can also get it through createawesomemeetings.com. And then it's not necessarily that you have to go out and get the book. We'd love to hear from you, of course, at Create Awesome Meetings on Facebook. We're on Twitter at Awesome Meetings. Any way you want to reach out to us, I'd be happy to hear from you, and we'll get back to you right away.
That's great. So we've got lots of ways to be able to follow up with you on your website, on Facebook, and of course to buy the book. And you've got something called Monday Meetings or Meeting Mondays?
Meeting Minute Monday on the YouTube channel, Create Awesome Meetings. If you've got a couple minutes on Monday mornings, I would sign up there and check out what's going on the YouTube channel. We're taking these condensed tips from some of the types of information that you're hearing today, putting them down into really bite-sized chunks that you can take away, and again, take action that week to put those things into implementation.
All right. So we've got some tools and resources, and Gord, you have offered a very generous gift about having the opportunity to have you show us how to be a great meeting facilitator.
Jean, you know, you've just done such wonderful work for your audience. And when I think about ways that I could give back to them, a lot of what I do doesn't come off the page necessarily as well, although people are using the book, in an effective way. Working with me live is a great opportunity to move your organization forward because I'm just doing it so consistently now. So what I'd be happy to do for your audience, just for this, because they're listening to this right now, if they go to createawesomemeetings.com/information managers, there's a special opportunity where they could get a chance to win a 2-hour in-person session with me wherever they are. I'd be happy to come right to them and work with their nonprofit board, their corporate board, their executive team. I can work with middle managers and their small departments. I can do it all in terms of then really helping them to get along and see what's happening, take action, and really make this happen. So I'm happy to offer that today. And thank you so much for your good service to your community.
This is a great opportunity. We want to be able to improve the way that we do our meetings, and that may be a really big step. And if not everybody understands the advantage of doing things differently, it makes it really hard to be able to demonstrate how it's going to move ahead. So to have Gord come in and help to facilitate your regular meeting, or perhaps you've got a special board meeting or an annual general meeting or something else that you want to be able to use Gord to be able to demonstrate how you can change the way that you do meetings. This is a fantastic opportunity, but it's only a limited time opportunity. So you need to be able to go to that website and sign up with Gord for the opportunity to win this 2-hour consultation.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's limited until tomorrow at noon. So if they get a chance and they're on today and they get a chance, they'll be there. Of course, for people watching this in a rebroadcast or something in the future, just get in touch with me directly and we'll figure something out. But for this audience today, really so glad to have you here. And again, just love, Jean, what you're doing for them and all the good ways you're bringing in all these experts to help them.
Thank you, Gord. And that's fantastic. And you met the timeline just perfectly. So we've learned 10 great ways to be able to create awesome meetings. You have the download available for the checklist, and do enter into the contest with Gord to be able to have him help you facilitate those meetings.
Great.
All right. Now you can enter your questions into the chat box. We've run a little short on time. So if you still have questions and we've run out of time, continue to enter them in the chat box. We'll be able to read them after the recording stops. And if you don't hear back from us right away, send us an email and we'll get back to you that way as well. Thank you very much, Gord.
It's a pleasure. It's funny. I'm so enjoying what I do these days because I know that every room that I walk in or every webinar that I'm on or podcast or wherever I'm reaching out to people, whether it's through the writing or the teaching, I'm making a difference. And I know that my work is able to do that. And then by working with people like yourself, the combined strength of our types of efforts in terms of helping organizations is simply multiplying. So I love what you're doing around the privacy work and the optimization that you're doing for your clients as well. I know that my thing is maybe just a part of what you're doing for your audience, but it certainly is significant. And when I hear these strengthening combinations, I know that we're going to help organizations go way further than they ever thought they could go.
I couldn't say it any better, Gord. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Jean Eaton, your practice management mentor. I'm delighted that you've joined us today and learned about creating Awesome Meetings with Gord Sheppard. If you'd like more information from Gord, you can follow up with us online. We do a 30-minute webinar just about every Thursday, and we'd love to have you join us. Sign up for the email so that you don't miss an event. This is Jean Eaton. Stay tuned.